All right. So, Star Trek, Picard, Season 3, Episode 4, No Win Scenario. This is the review for this episode. For those of you who have missed my previous reviews for this show, you could catch that here on this channel. You can catch that. Spoilers, of course. So, all my videos contain spoilers, really, unless I say there are no spoilers. But it's hard to talk about this episode and previous episodes without getting into the details. So, or at, plot points, all that stuff. So, anyway, folks, thanks so much for watching. Hit the subscribe button and be sure to also like this video after you're done. So, all right. So, here we are. No win scenario. We are continuing the voyages of the USS Titan A. Now, this crew, I started to really start to enjoy. I mean, in the sense that this crew, this particular crew of the Titan, feels more like a crew of a starship than any of the incarnations that we've had of Star Trek before. As I stated in my previous reviews, the problems that I have within the dialogue of Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and a lot of Picard season 1 and 2, a lot of Star Trek today feels like there is no chain of command, there is no authority, there is nothing there. Everyone talks like they're in an episode of Big Bang Theory or Friends. It just feels very sitcom-y, and I get it. The vibe is great. The vibe is fine. If you like the vibe, that's great, but it's not Star Trek. It really isn't. But I'm not going to take that away from people because there are people out there growing up today, and they are watching Star Trek, Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, all of this stuff. This is their Star Trek. Okay. What this does, though, is that it also opens doors for people who are into Star Trek today's Kurtzman's Trek, but it opens doors for them to discover on their own more Star Trek, Star Trek, Star Trek: The Next Generation, Star Trek Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and Enterprise. Those are proper Star Trek stories handled by people who were pretty much like the last of the remnants of the DNA of Gene Roddenberry. Terry Matalas, who was involved with the production of Star Trek Voyager and is a Star Trek fan, is involved as the showrunner for this season. And it definitely shows that this is a series, this particular season of Star Trek Picard, in the midst of, to me, personally, to me, uninteresting Star Trek. There it is, right there in the middle. Star Trek. The Star Trek that I love, the Star Trek that I grew up with, knowing, feeling, all of those things. And there is a sense of authority when it comes to the dialogue, the crew, and all of this stuff. So I just wanted to throw that out there that the crew of the Titan A, um, they become interesting. You understand these characters, you know who they are at this point, and they don't delve into these backstories or anything. And listen, it's Picard season 3. It's not the Titan crew's story. I get that, but there's room for a refresher of sorts. Stories for about this crew. Now, I don't know where it's going to go because I haven't seen the entire series, so we'll see. But if it does happen, I hope it's handled by Terry Matalas or someone like him who was a fan of this stuff. So with this episode, we were left with Riker telling Picard to pretty much get the hell off the bridge because of him, because of his plan of attack to initiate, um, their defense against the Shrike. Uh, it didn't work. They were lost in space, and so they're floating in space with no power, essentially. But there's times where this nebula has these power surges. So from time to time, power will go on, and Beverly Crusher, although she is helping people, being Dr. Crusher, doing her thing, she is also noticing these surges that happen from time to time. So she's paying attention. Jack Crusher and Picard, they have a moment in this show where they go into the holodeck, they go to 10 forward, they have a nice conversation. They share a drink, although Jack Crusher is not a wine guy, so they settle for Jameson. And in this scene happens because as they're floating in space, you see Picard. He's in his quarters where he's looking out the window, and he's like, "Man, we're this is all fucked up." And Riker goes and approaches him and tells him about how how they have gone to the far reaches of space, that death to him, the afterlife, is very hard to swallow that there's anything else out there. And so with the limited time that they have, the small window of time that they have, Riker tells him and says, "Listen, we're pretty much dying. This is the end. You should go talk to your son and try to get to know him for the amount of time that we have left alive with minimal life support." So yes, Picard takes him to the holodeck, like I mentioned before. They share a drink together, but Jack Crusher is not really wanting to get to know him. And so you see this sadness in Jack's eyes, and Picard says, "Well, maybe not for you, but for me." Now, the episode opens up with a flashback where Picard is sitting down, getting his meal in a booth, and all that stuff in 10 forward. And then these Starfleet cadets officers, they approach him because he is the legendary captain, Captain Jean-Luc Picard. And so they wanted to talk about him and his experiences, all those things. It's relevant because what happens is something, the things that he talks about, like with the Stargazer and all of this stuff with uh, Wesley's dad, Jack Crusher. His name is also, Jack is named after Beverly's first husband. Um, and it was also Jean-Luc's best friend. So he talks about this story that that happens with them and all this stuff, and that story apparently got shared around. So Riker knows, Beverly knows, Jack Crusher even knows all this stuff, and so kind of giving some insight into Picard of how he was back in his days before he became the captain of the Enterprise. And so it was a nice moment, and then Captain Shaw walks in. Captain Shaw walks in, goes into the bar, kind of crashes the party when he tells Jack Crusher, like, "Do you know who he really is?" To to Captain Shaw, who he is Locutus of Borg. He was on board a starship where he was pretty much how he describes himself, a grease monkey from Chicago, some dipshit from Chicago who was a grease monkey on board. He was the engineer of that ship. When the Borg attacked that ship, there was a higher ranking officer that ordered him to get into an escape pod. And because of his survivor's guilt, you see where the pain comes from. You see why he was so hostile to Picard in their meeting at first, when, in the first episode. So you definitely understand where Shaw is coming from. And I kind of knew that that's where it was going to come from because that was one of the most craziest things of Jean-Luc Picard's timeline was when he was a hostage of the Borg, and then they have assimilated his body, and he became part of the Borg and killed hundreds, thousands of Starfleet officers by destroying these ships. But Picard had no control. He was under, the Borg's assimilation. So there's a lot of regret. There's a lot of, pain in there in Picard still, despite that the Borg Queen was killed in First Contact and all of that stuff. It's still there. It's still within him. And you see how he reacts. And instead of lashing out, because if this was Kurtzman's Picard or Akiva Goldsman Picard, we would have had a scene where Picard breaks down or apologizes endlessly or lashes out at Captain Shaw because screaming causes tension. And that's not how it goes. It was handled beautifully here, where you see Picard taking all of this in, and he understands the pain and the sorrow that Shaw is going through. That this memory of even him saying that you were the most dangerous Borg, to the point where they even gave you a name, Locutus. And it's so well written, and you understand. everything. So it answers a lot of questions when it comes to Captain Shaw and his dickhead-ish ways of communicating with people. But then he soon kind of regrets reacting that way as he sees Picard's reaction, which is painful to watch, in a great way, and walks away and says, "No," you know, and walks off. And it's like that's in his mind, it's like at least from how I what I gathered was that Picard realizes that this is his legacy. So you take it and you just do the best you can to move forward. It's not Shaw's fault. It really isn't. But Shaw quickly realizes how much of an asshole he sounded, when he says the line, about how he substituted his charm for assholeness. Looks at everyone in the holodeck bar, and he's like, "Oh, Jesus." And we get a lot of Shaw in this episode, which I already love the character. I think he is a terrific addition to the Star Trek family, if you will, in the TNG family line. Um, and it took just 4 episodes, as opposed to Star Trek Discovery, which I did give a chance when it first aired. I watched the entire first season. I watched seasons 1 and 2 of Picard. I watched all of the Trek that I don't like. There is not a character in Star Trek Discovery that I remotely even related to, or that I even found interesting, or that I liked or cared for or whatever. I just didn't. Captain Shaw is a character that I absolutely love. I think he's fascinating. I think that there's layers to this character, and I absolutely love the actor who portrays him. I think he's terrific. He's got this scoundrel sense, like a Han Solo-ish vibe to him, and I absolutely love that. I think that's a nice, fresh take, but he's not arrogant. He's not like reckless, in that sense. I mean, he's very much to me like a combination, a little bit of Kirk, original series Kirk with Han Solo isms. And it's a nice blend, and that's Captain Shaw. So essentially, if Captain Kirk and Han Solo had a kid together, this guy would be it. So very flawed, yes, and that's what I love about him. And the relationship between him and Seven, you see it unfold a little bit here, where Seven knew who the Changeling was just by having the Changeling disguise themselves as Ensign LaForge, and Ensign LaForge acknowledges Seven as Commander Seven, doesn't use Commander Hansen. So and Captain Shaw does. He sort of, is what they call dead naming her, in that sense, without knocking you over the head with social commentary. Again, this is allegorical and it's done correctly. It's done correctly. So, but if it make it, here's the thing: if it was the other way around, I think Seven would be the name that you want to forget because you were a hostage of the Borg. It was a time of your life that was terrible. Uh, but you know what I'm saying? Like it's strange, like, but whatever. That's the decision that they went with. I think that it makes more sense that way, but they went this way, and which is fine. But there's reasons why, and I'm hoping to learn more as the episodes, progress, as they air. So I loved it, and so she catches that changeling, kills the changeling, because instead of Ensign LaForge acknowledging her as Commander Seven like she does, out of respect, she called her Commander Henson, and that's when uh, you're caught. You're caught, changeling. I know it's you. So you see how Shaw asks, "How did you know?" And she kind of acknowledges that he's an asshole without saying that he's an asshole by saying, she calls me Commander Seven because she fucking respects me. you know. So I thought that was cool. Um, Again, you see how Captain Shaw learns more, and he's working with the crew to get out of this nebula. So when there is a power surge, when there is power there, that's when they have the advantage to actually advance and get out of the situation. So they all work together in the end, kind of like Star Trek, where everyone works together in the end without having to resort to silly comedy or witty lines or shining a light on who has the best one-liner. It was just it was a collaborative effort, and I absolutely dug that. Turns out the nebula is not a nebula; it's a alien being, and it was very Star Trek. I loved it. It reminded me of Encounter at Farpoint, and they even mentioned Farpoint in this. So having the crew working together, and then Riker, facing death by trying to send a message to Deanna Troy, saying his goodbyes and all of that stuff. There's a lot of good character moments in this episode that I absolutely loved. And what's great is that instead of just resorting back to the good old days, which they kind of do, but by doing so, they allow these characters to kind of shine and kind of stretch out their fingers a little bit, and their toes to kind of show how much they have grown within 20 years since they were all together in Star Trek Nemesis. So it was cool. I mean, these characters are their characters. This makes sense. This is how they would be after all these years. They're different, but they're not that much different. And so it was great to see, Dr. Crusher getting involved with, trying to resolve this issue. At the end, the Shrike, again finds the Titan, goes for the attack because Vatic, Captain Vatic, who is the captain of the Shrike, she has her left hand, which this is going to be explained more, I hope, but her hand is a changeling. And so she takes out this Romulan looking knife, similar to what Shinzon's knife was in Nemesis. She cuts her hand off, and you see this hand turn into this face. And this face is insisting on her to pursue the Titan A, no matter what the obstacles are in this nebula. And you see how she becomes from mustache twirling villain to someone who is afraid of whoever she is speaking to. So she goes and pursues this thing, but then what happens at the end was great because throughout this asteroid field, as they maneuver through the asteroid field and all this stuff, Riker takes the tractor beam and throws an asteroid at the Shrike and knocks the Shrike. Kind of a throwback to earlier episodes in this season where the Shrike took a ship, Dr. Crusher's medical ship, and used the tractor beam and threw it at the Titan, damaging the Titan. Well, revenge is a bitch, and so Riker threw an asteroid at the Shrike, and the Shrike gets damaged, and in the process, and even Riverly's like, "Did you just throw an asteroid at the Shrike?" And he's like, "You goddamn right I did." And so Riker is Riker in that moment, and everyone is back in this moment. Like there is a moment in this episode where Jean-Luc Picard sits on that captain's chair, and it's TNG. It's a TNG feel. You've got the fan service, but the fan service is backed up by a clever story. It's backed up by a narrative that works, and it's just brilliant. I loved this episode. There were many things about this episode that I loved, aside from the technicals. The special effects are great. Some of it is a little whatever, computer generated imagery, but you're also looking at someone who watches Doctor Who. I'm used to the tinfoil sets, cardboard spaceships in space. I don't care. Story comes first. Characters also come first. Those things are definitely present in this show so far. I'm 4 episodes into this series and I absolutely love it so far. It's Star Trek. Does this show save the franchise? No. But this is a win for Star Trek fans. This is a win for people who love science fiction. This is a win for people who love uh, genres, and storytelling and all of this stuff. This is only going to happen once. Unfortunately, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But Star Trek like this needs to happen more. So that way we can also progress instead of going back and making prequels and all this stuff. They're taking this and going into the 25th century, and they're telling a story of what happens after the 24th century. What's what's that world like? So them getting into that and just create the world building and all that stuff, it's just it's brilliant. I think it makes sense. But although it is still within the confines of Alex Kurtzman, I mean the way the look of the show is, it's always dark and shit. But I don't mind it. Again, story comes first, and so yeah. And what I took away from this episode was that for me, Captain Shaw was the scene stealer. He was the guy that was present in this episode. This was the episode that made me go from I there's something about this guy. We're gonna find out who he is. He's a little sketchy, but then you understand, you learn more, and you respect him more in the second episode. It progresses from there to where now I legitimately love this character, and I don't know if he dies or not in this in this show. I don't. I hope they better not fucking kill him. He's good. So if they want to take this character and move outside of this show and have their own adventures and all that stuff, I just hope that it's handled by someone like Terry Matalas, or Terry Matalas, if Paramount decides to hire him again. Alex Kurtzman's like, listen, Alex Kurtzman has to see the reactions to this show in comparison to everything else that has come out. I mean, he has to see that. There's just no way that he's completely dumb about it. You know what I'm saying? So I hope that this inspires perhaps them to get people who understand this franchise and bring it here and tell stories. You know, like that's I don't know. I don't know. I hope that also this inspires other franchises that have been just really been diluted, like Doctor Who. They got Russell T Davies back. Star Wars. They haven't really done anything to make any changes for that. They just keep announcing movies and then just shelving them. That's all it's been. So this, I hope, inspires a lot of creatives to get up off their ass and actually be creative. And Star Trek Picard season 3 is it's an anomaly, but I am soaking every fiber of this show in me because it's been a while since I've been excited for Star Trek. Like it's been a while. So I'm happy. And I hope that it gets better. I hope that it gets better because we've got what, 6 more episodes left? There is room for disappointment, but 4 episodes in, it's been a while since I've seen a Star Trek show where I'm 4 episodes in and I am digging it, and it just gets better and better. So, anyway, folks, thank you so much. That is my review for this episode. No win scenario. Go check it out. It's on Paramount Plus, but you can also watch it through Amazon Prime. And I'm having fun. I can't wait for next week's episode. Of course, I will give you guys a review for that as well. But I'm out of here. Thank you so much for watching. Even if you disagreed with me in this review, if you were like, whatever, I didn't like it, whatever, I totally understand why you would not even give this show a chance. This franchise has hurt its customers. So, yeah, but listen, if you gave this show a shot and you're loving it so far, I'm right there with you, man. So, I'm having a great time, and everyone seems to be enjoying this show. So, it's a great time to be a Star Trek fan right now. So, yeah, guys, thank you so much once again. I will be back, but until then, I'm out. Peace.